IFA fam, appreciate you rocking with us. Apologies for the slight delay here, getting a little later than we would like to. But we are here with the first look at week 9 waivers and streaming options. Just to kick it off real quick, we do have 6 teams on bye in week 9, being the Broncos, Browns, Cowboys, Giants, Niners, and Steelers. So obviously a bigger bye week than what we had last week with just 2 teams. But anyway, Kev, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Let's give the people the goods. Kick us off with the quarterback streams for week 9er.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Justin Fields is at the top of the list this week. 41% rostered. They get the Miami Dolphins this week. Another really solid performance from him this week. Completed 17 of 23 for 151 and 2 touchdowns, but he added 8 carries for 60 yards and a score. They have really made a concerted effort to try to really start utilizing him more as a runner, design runs and stuff like that, which has really paid off for his fantasy performance that he's been put up. He has now posted back-to-back 24-plus point performances over the last 2 weeks. And this is a really good matchup. Miami ranks 25th in pass DVOA and allowed the 5th most fantasy points to quarterback. So really good matchup for Justin Fields. And honestly, Justin Fields isn't just a streaming option to me. He's very borderline, somebody you could look at a must add if he's out there. Because the Bears now face the Dolphins, the Lions, the Falcons, the Jets, and then the Packers over the next 5 weeks. So very good matchups moving forward here for Justin Fields. So I really like Justin Fields. He's really starting to come on, and he's done so with really not good options in terms of weapons, right? It's pretty much Darnell Mooney and a little bit of Cole Kmet and, mixing in some of the running backs. But, he's been able to do it on the ground, and that's what's kept him very fantasy viable. So if he's out there, I would look to add him. If you can, especially if you're looking for a quarterback, somebody that you could actually play for long term. Next up, you have Marcus Mariota. They get the LA Chargers this week. 26% roster. Played 20 of 28 passes. I was shocked that Arthur Smith actually decided to throw the ball 28 times. It's actually the second most pass attempts that they've had all year, with 253 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He also carried 6 times for 43 yards for 24 fantasy points against the Panthers. The Chargers ranked 13th in pass DVOA, but they just lost J.C. Jackson. They've had a ton of injuries to this entire team. So the Chargers allowed the 17th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, but this defense isn't going to be as good moving forward with some of the losses they've had. So I do think Marcus Mariota is another option you could look at. Next up, you have Ryan Tannehill. We'll have to see if he's able to return this week. I suspect the reason that he was held out was because they were playing the Houston Texans this week. I feel like they didn't really need him as much because this week they play Sunday Night Football at Arrowhead against the Chiefs. So KC ranks 23rd in pass DVOA, and they allow the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Where they're going to have to throw the ball in this game. They're going to have to try to keep up with the explosive Kansas City offense here, especially one that's coming off a bye, in Arrowhead, Sunday Night Football. So Ryan Tannehill is going to have to throw the ball. So I don't mind going to him if you're in a pinch. And then the last couple, Andy Dalton, roster in 15% of leagues. Completed 22 of 30 passes or 229 yards. They take on the Baltimore Ravens this week. He also had 2 touchdowns for 17 fantasy points. The Ravens ranked 8th in pass DVOA, but they have allowed the 8th most fantasy points on the season. So that is certainly something that we should be looking at as well. And then we have Sam Ehlinger, rostered in 13% of leagues. This is very thin, but completed 17 of 23 for 201 and no scores. He also rushed 6 times for 15 yards. The Patriots ranked 15th in pass DVOA. They allowed the 15th most fantasy points on the season. I didn't actually think Sam Ehlinger for his first start actually didn't play that poorly today. Really, that game could have been much closer, especially at the end, because he hit Michael Pittman right in the hands. It should have been a reception. Could have got them down there for a last-second field goal. It wasn't on him, but overall, I thought Sam Ehlinger actually played pretty well today for being his first start of the season. So, again, kind of desperate, especially in like a 14, 16-team league. It would be something like that. But Sam Ehlinger could be an option for you. So those are kind of the quarterbacks that I'm looking at this week.
Rolling right on over to the running back. I don't think there's any must-add or priority add kind of guys here. So really this is kind of the week to, maybe pick up some of these handcuff guys, stash some of these guys, in case of any future situations arise where their value could jump up. But we'll kick things off talking about Jermichael Hasty. Obviously, this was the Travis Etienne show today. He dominated the snaps as well, seeing nearly 80% of the snaps. But Hasty did get 8 opportunities on 16 snaps, also ran 10 routes, which is something we obviously like to see. He's clearly the backup to roster behind Etienne, as rookie Snoop Connor saw just 1 snap. So I think you can look and stash him. Next, Dwayne Washington. This one is solely on Mark Ingram's knee injury. I haven't seen anything recently in terms of the severity or if he's expected to miss any time or anything like that. But if Mark Ingram does miss time, it was Dwayne Washington who jumped into that spot. Obviously, we saw a little bit more of Taysom Hill today as well. But I think if Dwayne Washington were practicing as the number two, he could be more involved going forward. So that's another name kind of just monitor and pay attention to as things keep going this week. Dearness Johnson, this one relies again on Kareem Hunt. We have a bunch of trade rumors swirling around him. We've seen Dearness Johnson play pretty well too in some limited samples. So if he starts to get the looks that Hunt was getting, he could have some standalone value. Then obviously, if anything were to happen to Nick Chubb, his value would then skyrocket. Kyron Williams, again, another stash here. Really going to depend on what ends up happening if the Rams are one of these teams that are looking to trade for someone. Gonna have to pay attention to see what happens with Cam Akers too. Could he be cut? I'm not entirely sure, but it definitely seems like he is not in the Rams' future plans. So Kyron Williams is a name to monitor. Dontrell Hilliard. We saw the Titans just go full blown running game mode here today without Ryan Tannehill. Hilliard is clearly the guy that we want to have behind Derrick Henry if anything were to happen to him. And really, the only thing that's going for this Tennessee offense anyway is the run game. So Hilliard could have some standalone value. I don't really think they want to be running Derrick Henry 30 times per game every single week if they can get away with it. And Hilliard has looked good, even going back to last year. So he's another name to add and monitor if you're in a deeper league. The KC running backs, Pacheco did see a huge increase in rostership from last week. He's up to like 24%. But Jerick McKinnon's still sitting down there like 10% rostership on ESPN. He hasn't been getting the hype. Obviously, that's gone to Pacheco. The touchdowns have gone to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But McKinnon has led this team in snap share, and he seems to be the preferred pass catching back as well. So I think he needs to be rostered, especially more in deep leagues. Obviously, 8-10 team leagues, you don't need to look at Jerick McKinnon here. But 12 leagues and higher, I think he makes for an interesting stash, assuming Pacheco is off the books. Travis Homer, we saw him come in from his first game back from IR and immediately went ahead of DJ Dallas, playing 14 snaps. Dallas is 5. So he is the guy that we want to have behind Ken Walker if anything were to happen to him. Deion Jackson, I just threw his name on here just as someone to look at with the JT injury. We did have a comment leading us off here in the YouTube chat asking if Deion Jackson was going to be on the list. So with this, it doesn't seem like this is anything significant for JT, but if he's going to continue to be bothered by this ankle injury, and then especially if the Colts continue to lose games, I think they're 3-4-1 after this loss today. Kev, you're saying that they probably should have won it. Could they look at shutting down JT? I don't know, but we've seen Deion Jackson perform well, so I think he is another name you can look to stash. And then if guys like Rachaad White are sitting out there, he should not be, especially in 12-team leagues. But if for some reason he is, he needs to be picked up. He's probably already owned. And then guys like Jalen Warren, the Steelers are on bye. You could look to stash him. I don't think you necessarily have to because he didn't. It's not like he had some crazy outing today, but he has seemed to have a little bit more pop and burst, a little bit of pep in his step, if you will, compared to Najee Harris. And it is interesting to note that today, on the third down plays, Jalen Warren had 7 snaps on third down compared to only 2 for Najee Harris. So could this become, a little bit more of a committee coming out of the bye? We'll have to see. And then, guys like Kenneth Gainwell. And I threw Amir Abdullah on here. He's really only in play, like if you think you can predict when the Raiders are going to be trailing, right? But Abdullah does seem to get more of the work in those games where they're trailing. And the Raiders do have the 11th most difficult schedule for running backs going forward. So there's kind of the picture at running back, if you will.
Yeah, and I think this week could be interesting because of the trade deadline on Tuesday night, right? Like we could see a lot of movement. We could see nothing happen.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
if Alvin Kamara gets moved, if Kareem Hunt gets moved, like it could open up a lot of value with some of these guys. So like a Dearness Johnson, if you have an open, considering they play tomorrow night, if he's or Monday night probably when you're listening to this, depending on when you're listening to this, but if he's sitting out there and it's before obviously Monday night football, I would look to get him on your team if you can. If you have a guy that's on bye, somebody you can drop, like I would like to have him already rostered. That way you don't have to put in a waiver claim for him because he is somebody that you can roster right now without having to worry about. That's something that I did today. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump over to the wide receiver position. I have Joshua Palmer on here. I was actually surprised he's available as much that he is. 25% is all he's rostered in. They were on bye this week, but Mike Williams is expected to miss the next 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury, suffered a high ankle injury and then their game last week. So Josh Palmer, if he's sitting out there, I know Austin Eckler, I think this week on the Yahoo Fantasy podcast that he does, said that if he could add anybody right now, it'd be Joshua Palmer, but it's also his teammate. But anyways, Joshua Palmer, I do think he hasn't played great in the absence of Keenan Allen, but I do think with this bye week, I think it gives Justin Herbert some time to get healthy and get right. We know he was suffering from that rib injury. That an extra week off, I think, could really help this offense and as a whole. So I do think Joshua Palmer is something that I'm definitely looking to add, especially with as many teams that are on bye over the next couple of weeks. So Josh Palmer, I think, is a really strong play this week, probably like a wide receiver 3 option. Garrett Wilson, I put him on here because at Yahoo, he's only rostered in 45% of leagues, but 71% in ESPN, which I felt like that would be where he would come in at. But if he is somehow was dropped in your leagues because he struggled a little bit, he should not be on waivers. It cost 6 of 7 for 115 today with Corey Davis out and Elijah Moore seemingly in the doghouse there for the Jets. So he started to build a pretty strong rapport with Zach Wilson as well. So Garrett Wilson is definitely somebody you should be looking to add. Devin Duvernay rostered 29% of leagues, hauled in all 4 targets for 31 yards, also rushed twice for 33 yards and a score this past Thursday night against the Bucks. Rashad Bateman has once again exited the game with an injury. I think Duvernay is a decent wide receiver for at least over while bye weeks are going on. Something I think you can kind of look at this week to get the Saints. And then Rondale Moore rostered in 35% of leagues, caught 7 passes for 92 yards and a touchdown today for 19 fantasy points. He's now seen 8 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 games, and I think he should be viewed as a pretty solid wide receiver 3 this week against the Seahawks. So we're starting to see the effects of DeAndre Hopkins kind of not allowing teams to just putting so much effort into stopping DeAndre Hopkins is opening things up for the rest of the pass catchers here. So Rondale Moore, I think, is a pretty solid add this week as well. And then the rest of these guys are kind of 12 teams and higher type of guys. Terrace Marshall, love to see it. Absolutely love to see it. It only took 2 years, but 1% rostered. Second year wide receiver had his best game of the season. He saw 9 targets today, hauled in 4 of them for 87 yards. He was also targeted multiple times in the end zone. He did not come down with one of them, but with CMC and Robbie Anderson out the door is kind of wide open for him to see to carve out a pretty substantial role in this offense. So he actually looked pretty good today, better than I've ever seen him look over the last 2 years. So Terrace Marshall, he was a guy that coming out, a lot of people really liked, including myself. Out of college, he didn't do absolutely nothing last year in that offense. But with so many guys gone from this offense, and seemingly they're probably going to be trailing in a lot of these games. Terrace Marshall, I don't hate adding him in 12 teams and higher. And if heaven forbid if DJ Moore were to get traded by Tuesday, he's going to be the only guy that's going to be seeing targets here in this offense. So really a pretty big bump for him. So Terrace Marshall, definitely think you can look to add him. Romeo Dobbs, I put him on here. Rostered in 46% of Yahoo leagues. Hauled in so far, he's hauled in 2 of 4 targets for 26 yards and a score. The Packers take on the Lions next week, so that is a tremendous matchup there. We know that they don't really have any other pass catchers. We'll see with Alan Lazard if he's able to return next week. But Romeo Dobbs, I think, is a pretty decent add if somebody were to drop him after really struggling over the last couple of weeks. Alec Pierce, 41%, saw the second most targets today behind Michael Pittman. Hauled in 3 of 5 for 65 yards. He also ran around 67% of dropbacks today. He's kind of carved out the role as a deep threat here in this offense. Paris Campbell was also involved today, but didn't see as many targets, but he did see some opportunity on the ground. I think he had 30 rushing yards. So I think both of them are worthy adds, but I have a high expectation for fantasy output of how much you're going to be able to trust them. But with so many teams on bye, I think you could look to play either one of them as kind of a flex option. And then Julio Jones this week returned this week, and he actually made it through the entire game without getting hurt. Secured 2 of 4 targets for 21 yards and a touchdown. If he can stay healthy, he could end up being somebody that maybe is a viable fantasy option. He's not going to be the same Julio Jones that he ever was before. Those days are long gone. But I think he could be something that they look to utilize inside the red zone and stuff like that. But he's definitely just the wide receiver 3 on this team. He's going to play limited snaps. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be out there playing 80, 90% of the snaps. He's probably going to be more of a 40, 50% route type of guy. But I still think within this offense, if this offense can figure things out, he could be a guy that sees 6, 7 targets per game if he's healthy. So next up, we still have the Chiefs wide receivers I have on here: Marquez Valdez-Scantling and McCole Hardman. Both were obviously on bye this week. It was Kadarius Toney hype fest all week. People getting super excited about Kadarius Toney, but I'm gonna be honest. I don't think Kadarius Toney is going to be a factor at all this year. I think this is much more of a 2023 play than it was for 2022. The Chiefs' offense is one of the most complex offenses to learn. It takes these teams, takes these wide receivers a very, very long time to figure this thing out. It's one of the reasons why Sky Moore hasn't been more involved in this offense, because they how long it takes to pick up this offense. I do not expect Kadarius Toney to have much of any role, even though Kadarius Toney now is rostered in 60% of leagues compared to 36% and 35% in typical Hardman. Doesn't make any sense. He shouldn't be. I would much rather have MVS or McCole Hardman in this offense than Kadarius Toney. So if either one of those guys are sitting out there, I have no problem picking one of them up. All of them, they're always going to be in play for the Chiefs and their high-powered offense. So lastly, the last couple of guys I have on here, guys like Isaiah McKenzie, Zay Jones, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Tyquan Thornton, I think are all options that you could look at for flex options, especially through bye weeks. But I don't think any of them really have a massive upside. Donovan Peoples-Jones rostered in 24% of leagues. They play tomorrow night. He's not a sexy option, but he has gone over 70 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. And with Deshaun Watson, nearing a return over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think maybe you can look at something like that. But the rest of these guys are just kind of like flex play options. So that's all I got at wide receiver.
So wrap it up with the Week 9 tight end streams. Going to kick things off with Evan Ingram. He just continues to play well. The only issue that's been holding him back in terms of fantasy production has been his lack of touchdowns. He did get one today, but he saw another 6 targets today. That's making it 4 weeks in a row with at least 6 targets. Has at least 50 yards in 3 of those weeks as well. So I really like him going forward. Ty Conklin, I said it earlier on the Start Sit show, on the Sunday morning show, that Conklin has just absolutely disappeared. He was balling earlier in the year, hasn't been doing anything, and then he comes out and drops 6 for 79 and 2. I'm not necessarily chasing the points here, but he did start to separate himself a little bit from CJ Uzoma, which has kind of been holding him back the past couple of weeks. And they do have Buffalo next week, so they're going to be playing from behind. Elijah Moore still is not a factor after, demanding a trade. He hasn't really seen the light of day, even with Corey Davis being out today. So I think Conklin could see some more targets going forward. Logan Thomas, it was his first game back today after a couple weeks out with that calf injury. Led the Commanders tight ends in snaps. It didn't amount to anything fantasy-wise, but we should see his playing time continue to increase as time goes on. Should put guys like John Bates and Armani Rogers pushed to the side. And as a plus, the Commanders have the 4th easiest tight end schedule rest of season. And I just want to throw out Greg Dulcich real quick. Obviously, the Broncos have a bye, so you're not using him for Week 9, and I definitely would not suggest picking him up, unless you, for whatever reason, have a deeper bench and you're struggling at tight end. Maybe you could pick him up and hold him through the bye, but you likely don't have that luxury. So he's just a name to keep in mind going forward. Since he came back in Week 6, he has 17 targets over those past 3 weeks, and he's caught 12 for almost 200 yards and a score. So he's clearly the tight end that we want in Denver. And then Isaiah Likely, obviously, he's not going to have much value as long as Mark Andrews is in the lineup. But the Ravens do have a bye coming up in Week 10. Andrews has been dealing with that knee injury. He obviously got ruled out for the game on Thursday night with that shoulder injury. So if they decide to sit him for whatever reason in Week 9 with that Week 10 bye coming up, Isaiah Likely immediately steps into tight end 1 territory. So that's a name to just kind of keep in your back pocket to see if anything happens to Mark Andrews, because he's played really well And maybe if the Ravens continue to deal with injuries to guys like Rashad Bateman, they go a little bit more like two tight end set kind of things and get Isaiah Likely more involved that way. But that's kind of it at tight end. It's kind of ugly out there. We did have a question from Kyle. You were talking about picking up Josh Palmer, but would you do it at the expense of Brian Robinson, full PPR?
Not unless you were extremely deep at the position that you could withstand losing Brian Robinson. Like, um, not that because again, Brian Robinson has not been very good, and I continue to say it. I don't get why they at this point why they're playing Brian Robinson over Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson's kind of turned into the pass catching back here for this team, and which is crazy that they decided to wait
So
till now.
frustrating.
Yeah. Because clearly Antonio Gibson is the best running back on this team. I mean, I don't know. Anybody with eyes can see that he is the best running back they have to offer. But I don't know. Like if you absolutely had to, I mean, I don't hate it for Josh Palmer because I don't think Brian Robinson's going to be something that's going to kill you. But I also am not a huge fan of dropping running backs, that are getting volume, right? I mean, he's not been good, but he's getting, usually, what, 12, 15, 16, even up to 20 carries per game. And I would prefer to have that than Josh Palmer, who, unless you're in a big pinch for a wide receiver, then that's about the only way I would look to do it. I think I would hold Brian Robinson.
Just imagine thinking you need to only run Antonio Gibson either as like a first and second down back and let JD McKissick be the pass catching back, or let Brian Robinson why can't we just have both? Why can't we just have both?
I don't know, and I also don't understand why. I actually there's been some like rumors that they were looking to drop or they were looking to trade Antonio Gibson, or teams are calling him. I was like, please, Lord, get him out of there, get him out. Like that video that you see with the guy that's walking down the street and there's the cat stuck in the pet store, and the guy's like, I'm gonna get you out of here. You just wait. That's exactly how I feel with Antonio Gibson. Like somebody's got to get him out of there because he is way too good of a running back to be stuck in this situation that he's in there. But yeah.
Cubanito, I have not done any defense or kicker prep, but I will be dropping a video either tomorrow night or early on Tuesday. So I will have a defense and kicker streaming video coming out, within like the next 24 to 36 hours.
Yeah. So, hey, and by the way, I guess as we wrap this thing up, really solid performance today. Tony Pollard absolutely crushed. Of course, Jerry Jones doing Jerry Jones things, saying this team runs as Zeke goes. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, Jerry Jones. You are a delusional old man. The Cowboys do not run whatsoever because of Zeke Elliott. I digress. Deonta Foreman also fantastic today. Excellent from him as well. So, anyways, that's all I had to say about that. I saw the comment after the game. I'm like, God, I hate Jerry Jones. This guy's such an idiot. Because Tony Pollard is clearly the best running back they have on the roster. I don't think that can be debated anymore. But we could go all day on that. I don't have time to talk about that.
You could go all day on that.
You know this. I've talked about this so much this offseason, and now here we are. But anyways, I appreciate everybody checking out the video. Hope everybody has a great Halloween. Stay safe. Hope your kids have fun. If you have them, if you don't, whatever you're doing, have a good time. We will see you guys again here very soon. We got ranking videos coming out on Wednesday, and then we have our regular start sit show, DFS coming out Thursday. Everything back intact this week. So have a good rest of the week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will see you on the next one. Bye.